and welcome to another episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. This week, Bernadette Kiely is an artist who grew up in Carrick and Suir, County Tipperary. She began her professional career as a graphic designer and eventually found her way back to art through a job in the Butler Gallery in Kilkenny. She also spent many years teaching at the Grennan Mills in Thomastown, County Kilkenny, where I went to meet her recently to discuss her latest exhibition, which opened here at South Tip Art Centre on the 29th of August and runs until September 21st. Tell Me About Your Mother, featuring The Two Travellers, is an intimate collection of smaller works including drawings, paintings, photographs and poetry with reference objects. Tell Me About Your Mother is a poignant meditation on time, grief, and a celebration of a life combined. Your current exhibition, Bernadette, which is the one that we've got on at the moment in the Art Centre here, is Tell Me About Your Mother. So I know it's deeply kind of personal work, isn't it? Related to the story of your mother. Do you want to explain a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's called Tell Me About Your Mother, and in brackets featuring The Two Travellers, which is a poem written by that man, C.J. Boland from Killenaule originally. But I was asked to do an exhibition by the original curator of this, Anya Van Gosselin, at Camera 8 Gallery in Wexford. Yeah, beautiful gallery. And Anya wanted me to have 3 very large drawings in the space, so I thought about it a little, and then one day I thought, well, I better actually put something together for Anya because she was coming to visit. So when my mother died, almost 3 weeks later, I was actually in the RHA on a residency. So I did for 6 months. So I didn't really have time to process her death here or even go to the grave, so I was kind of separate from what had happened. And she died suddenly as well, which is such a bigger shock than if she died slowly. So I actually made work not consciously related to her. I didn't set out, I'm going to make work about my mother. But I started making work that brought my family more to the fore, because I had been doing a bit of that previously. And so I made those lace drawings related to my aunts. I started making work, I've done such a lot of work about flooding. I started making work about flooding near Carrick on Suir as well. And gradually just started making work about places and objects that really were important to me. And part of that was to kind of access other areas of myself that I wanted to, including the graphics, the graphic design, that I wanted to kind of incorporate into my work, but just didn't have the time, which is what the RHA residency is fantastic for, So I made a good bit of work over a period of time, and even when I came back here. So anyway, that particular day I went into the studio and I thought, right, I better put something together. So I just took, say, this canvas, that canvas, that canvas, that canvas, maybe 5, 6 of them, and I put them all up here in this room. And I looked at them and I went and I got a vase of dried flowers, which is not in this particular iteration of the show, but was in one of the others or 2. And the flowers, my mother had said to me one day, why are you keeping dried flowers kind of all over the place? And I said, well, they're really beautiful and I might use them in the future, like drawing or who knows. And she said, how do you paint dead flowers? And I thought, all right, she thinks that you can only paint live flowers, that's in her head. So anyway, I had the vase, I got the vase, I put the vase there against the wall or on some sort of plinth, and I looked at it and I thought, it's all about my mother. Which I ended up crying my eyes out actually, and I really hadn't done that since she died.
So you were processing so much through the work and you hadn't even realised.
Exactly, which was kind of, So I said that to Anya and she thought, great, that was it. So I added a couple of little more things in. So it was a very organic process, and I really didn't even know I was doing it, but it was what was helping me to process the fact that she had died. And I'm the oldest, so I was really close to her, and you don't realise, of course, how close you are to your parents until they die. Well, you do to a certain extent, but then you realise how deep it goes. I'm very interested in what's underneath rather than the surface. So a lot of what I've done has been the reflection. So it's like seeing something that isn't there.
Yeah.
So an awful lot of what I do in a way is trying to capture something that actually isn't there.
At all. Yeah.
And I use that analogy of Aristotle, who said it's like the mirror. If you look in the mirror, you see the image, but it's not real. But you see it. So it's there.
Yeah.
But it's not real.
Yeah.
So I think that almost everything I do is related to that. And it is, of course, the passage of time, and also the fact that also perception. I'm very interested in what we're actually seeing.
Yeah.
And also in nature, you see, there's always fuzzy boundaries. Like, the common thing, there's no straight edges in nature. But there's always a fuzzy boundary because they're always moving. Even though it looks really static on a lovely clear day. No, everything's moving all the time. Vibrational analysis, which is a very interesting subject as well that I don't understand, mechanical. But, there's all this stuff kind of going on all the time. So there's always just like so much to be interested in,
Water, you mentioned there a few minutes ago that your first memory, you think, was of a flood.
Well, my mother said that because they lived in Clonmel, around the corner from the art centre. That when I was about 3 months, she said she remembered holding me up and we were looking out the window and the whole place was flooded in Clonmel. So they subsequently moved to Carrick on Suir, but again on the quay, right on the quay. Yeah, so my first kind of 7 years were spent there on that quay. And that flooded massively. And in fact, one of my biggest memories there is that my father pulled a little boy out of the river, just our neighbour across, there, like from us. He was only 3 and he tried to jump from the quay onto a barge. There was a barge moored there and he fell down between. My father was a very good swimmer, so he went down and got him. So I think you don't ever forget that kind of thing.
Not at all, no.
So, like, coupled with the kind of amazingness of the size of that river as well, the shore, when you're a child, it's so big and so powerful and so beautiful, and we used to swim in it as well, but also is that destructive nature, that image of that little boy kind of never went out of my head. Anyway, eventually I got the house here in Thomastown and I wanted to be by a river. And I felt it was a bit far from the sea because we used to go to the sea quite a bit. But I wanted to be by a river. Yeah, the river. And I didn't really know I was going to make so much work about it. But as soon as I started, all my work was about the river.
So that's become your...
one of my main, themes.
It's archetypal or something, isn't
exactly.
it? Yeah. And the flood as well, the idea of the flood.
Yeah. It's metaphorical, of course, as well. That's kind of what I tap into is, I suppose, the poetic side of it as well. Because I'm here and I live in Thomastown on the river, I'm at a vantage point where I can witness the whole lot and have experience I couldn't get out. It's become, I suppose, more and more pressing, obviously, throughout the world, and it will be. I mean, it'll get worse. And I suppose as well, I just recently posted those fire paintings that I had done as a kind of my tiny little response to the Amazon. Yeah. So that's something I've always followed as well, because I made those paintings in 2000. It was just before the EU directive came in to stop burning in Ireland. So that's kind of something else that has come out of, and I won't say it was a conscious thing. I'm not going to deliberately sort of make illustrative work to do with certain issues. Yeah. It was more a painterly challenge for me. So that, let's say, I suppose it's a bit of both. It's like the technical challenges of trying to use paint so that you can make it look like something that's actually not solid, not there, that's flowing like water, and smoke coming from fire, air. A long time ago, I did a lot of work to do with the sky and clouds and atmosphere, weather again. Yeah. A lot of it is to do with the weather. And I do remember probably 20 years ago or so, artists kind of laughing about other artists making work about the weather. And I thought, but the weather's the most important thing.
It totally is.
I mean, it's more important than war, then you name whatever you can name. The weather is what's controlling us.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I remember that from growing up in Carrick, because if ever you met someone or your parents met anyone, you always spoke about the weather. And now they still do. So I thought, well, what's the most pressing thing in people's minds? It seems to be the weather.
Yeah.
So why is that? And then you begin to investigate that, you know.
I suppose it affects you on such an emotional level, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also interested, I suppose, in kind of things from a scientific angle. Now, I'm not scientific, and I find it actually quite difficult, but to think about things on, like I did one exhibition called Simple Harmonic Motion, which apparently is a very complex mathematical I won't say equation, but a mathematical subject, we'll say concept. And I thought, I don't understand. Someone's trying to explain it to me. I don't actually get what you're saying, but I can see it. I can see it. Simple harmonic motion. So it's like tapping into almost the physics of something as well. So it's the physical world and what's actually happening.
Yeah.
You know, so I can see the surface, I can see the depth, and I can see down at the bottom. So I like to look through whatever it is I'm looking at. I like to see more than just the surface, if you know what I mean. So that kind of brings me to where you were mentioning about the layers.
Yeah.
So it is a case of, I suppose, rather than the graphic way of approaching a subject, which is often very linear and flat colour and stuff, my way is I want to explore the depths, you know, and that's why, in a way, they are like they are. And so I kind of work to get the work to a stage where I feel, and not necessarily again, I've explored the depths, because you don't think those thoughts. You just know when it gets to a certain point, that's okay.
Yeah.
Any drawing I do is more a recording. So I have done a lot of drawing in the landscape, but it's basically recording time. So I could say really that if you were to say anything, that my most enduring subject is time and the passage of time. So, and I see myself really just as a recorder. So to start with making a painting, I take a lot of photos. I did an awful lot of photography. In fact, I did more photography at college than anything else. I remember locking the dark room when I was in it so no one could get in.
Oh my God.
Because at night, you know, it's like, don't come in for another hour.
Great place to lose yourself.
And to develop your own and see it all coming out, you know, just emerging. I love that. And I always keep it in the back of my mind that somehow, that's why I'm really glad I was able to bring this photograph in of the house, you know, because it has to obviously come from something very meaningful.
Yes.
Otherwise, it was no reason for it.
So the house on the poster, that was the house your mother...
That's my house. I grew up in Carrick on Suir on Killenaule Street.
And it's obviously uninhabited.
Derelict, My mother ran it as a guest house. So the title I use for it is In the Guest House of My Mind. Okay. So it took me 3 years to track down the owner now. So that's it.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
It was beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I just took the photograph because I was there. Because everywhere I go, I take photographs. I'm sure I'm a pest, but I hadn't intended. It was like the whole exhibition just came out.
Yeah.
It came into play by itself.
That's amazing, yeah.
I usually have photographs to work from, whether they're my own or sometimes I've downloaded them if they're to do with flooding or land that I can see from some vantage point or something that attracts my attention, I suppose.
Yeah.
The planning is like the big part of it in a way.
Yeah.
The research, planning, deciding what I'm going to do, deciding it's not that I'm going from one thing to the other all the time. I mean, I am obviously, but it's like, I suppose sometimes you can have too many ideas.
Yeah.
And it's a process of editing.
Yeah.
So it's like I might have 2 or 3 things that I feel are quite pressing. I do an awful lot of writing.
Okay.
And a lot of reading.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask you that from your titles.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I was going to say, do you write? Because
Yeah.
they're the titles of somebody who writes, I would say.
At one point I thought I'd become a writer. I used to do a lot of writing. I don't necessarily have the titles when I start.
I suppose
but it becomes apparent as time goes on. And I suppose I read an awful lot of literature, maybe, and poetry.
Yeah.
And in a way, I'd be inspired by literature and poetry, and I might come across a sentence, and it could even be in the newspaper, of something that I would think,
There's lovely rhythm
or
to
it's
them.
perfect for my title. That's what I need. There was one, God, I can't even remember, there's so many of them. One title I used was something I read in the paper one Saturday morning, and it was actually from the filmmaker Neil Jordan.
Okay.
And he wasn't saying that as an actual sentence. He said it in context of something else. And while I was reading it, I thought, that's exactly suitable for my title. And I took it, because it wasn't, you see, I suppose there's always a thing of like, are you stealing his words? No, I'm actually just taking a little bit of it to suit my context. I mean, this is the world. We're all influenced by each other.
I mean, words are free.
And the simple thing is you can do it. Yeah. So I suppose I'm always alert to what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing in that, respect. I used the poem The Two Travellers for the simple reason that it was written by the man from Clonmel, but I was driving to Dublin one morning, ages ago, I mean it must be again 20 years ago, and I heard the poem on the radio one Saturday morning early, and I thought, that's the perfect poem for my mother and father, because it describes all the places that my mother would have grown up around, Drangan, Feathered, all those places, but it also describes somebody who's travelled a lot abroad. And so I instantly thought, well, my mother is the woman who stayed at home, and my father, because he was in the RAF, he was in Malaysia and Singapore. And so I thought, So I went home and I asked them, did they ever hear of it? And they both knew it off by heart.
Oh, wow.
And were able to quote it. And this is our poem. So when I was doing the exhibition, I thought about the poem and how kind of relevant it was to their lives, and also how relevant, and it's one of those poems you would have learned at school, and that sort of poetry in a way is kind of sidelined. It's like that rhythm, anyone can make up a rhyme, which they can't actually. But people dismiss kind of Robert Service type poetry as being usher and it all has to rhyme and all this. It's not modern, it's not contemporary. So I actually showed it to a friend of mine who's a poet, and she read it and she thought it was great, and it should be brought back, that type of poetry. But it speaks very much to me of displacement, and living in the world that we are now. You hear so much about, my God, people in the ocean in boats. It just kills me, kills everyone to hear about it, and displacement and having to leave your country and go somewhere you don't even know where you're going to end up. I mean, it reminds me of the famine in Ireland. It really is. Where actually I had done some work on the famine previous, and thought, my God, it's so horrific. So I think the poem, it speaks to staying where you are, if you can, and then not being able to stay where you are, and having to move or travelling for the sake of it, and I mean that kind of feeds into the environmental thing as well, as people. I mean the whole thing now is they're trying to get people not to fly, not to travel because of the air miles and carbon monoxide and all the rest of it. And it's like the whole world has become such a kind of a mess. We can see it every day of the week. So it's like, I suppose the essence of the poem is you can find yourself outside your own front door or within your own. You don't have to travel all over the world to find something that when you come home, it's there already. And if people could only kind of know that before they do it.
Thanks a million for your time.
Okay.
And I really do, I mean it. I look forward to living with these for the next few weeks. And thanks so much, and best of luck with it all.
Okay, great.
Thanks a million. And that's it for another episode of the South Tip Arts Podcast. If you'd like to get in contact, the email address is southtippartspodcast@gmail.com. That's southtippartspodcast@gmail.com. Or you can contact us here at the Centre in Nelson Street in Clonmel. Tell Me About Your Mother, featuring the two travellers, runs until September 21st. The gallery is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Saturdays, and this is really one not to be missed. Until next week, goodbye.